The morning air in the boreal forests of northern Canada is cold and sharp, a kind of cold that clings to your skin and breathes into your lungs with a crispness that reminds you alive. For me, it's the kind of place where time slows, where the rhythm of nature replaces the noise of cities. I had come here in early November, equipped with my camera, notebook, and months of research, to track the behaviors of a wolf pack known as the Northern Pines Pack, a group of 16 wolves with a territory that spanned more than 300 square kilometers near the edge of Great Slave Lake. I had no idea then that I would witness a story of such profound solidarity that it would redefine what I thought I knew about animal behavior. It started with Alpha 7, the pack leader. A towering gray male with eyes the color of melting snow, Alpha 7 had led his family for nearly 4 years. Under his leadership, the pack had thrived. I had seen him orchestrate hunts with precision, resolve internal tensions with calm authority, and protect the young with a vigilance that rivaled any human parent. But on the third week of my observation, things changed. I found him alone near a shallow ravine, limping heavily. His left hind leg was mangled, likely from a moose's kick. The injury was recent. His fur was matted with blood, and he struggled to rise from the frosted earth. Most striking, however, was not his pain, it was his solitude. The rest of the pack was nowhere in sight. For a moment, I thought the inevitable had happened, the pack had left him. In wolf hierarchy, strength ensures survival. Injured alphas are often challenged, cast aside, or worse. But as I set up my long lens camera to document what I expected would be his final days, something extraordinary unfolded. That evening, just before twilight, I heard the distant howls. A chorus of familiar voices echoed across the trees. It grew louder, closer. Then, through the lattice of spruce and pine, they emerged. One by one, the entire pack. They approached him not with hostility but with purpose. I held my breath, watching through the lens as Beta 3, a young black female, approached Alpha 7 and gently nudged his muzzle. She licked his wounds. Another wolf, Delta 6, dropped a partially eaten hare beside him. Others circled close, forming a perimeter. They lay down, flanking him as though to provide warmth and protection. That night, I barely slept. I wrote notes, captured photos, replayed the scene in my head. Something profound was happening. These wolves were not behaving out of instinct alone. There was intent, coordination, and, dare I say it, compassion. Over the next week, I kept a respectful distance, watching. Alpha 7 never left the clearing. He couldn't, but the pack never left him either. Each morning, different wolves took turns leaving the group to hunt. They returned with meat and placed it in front of him. One evening, I saw Omega 2, a wiry young male often teased and pushed around by others, curl beside Alpha 7 for hours. His presence was gentle, almost reverent. The roles within the pack had shifted. Temporarily, yes, but undeniably. Leadership had become distributed. The older wolves ensured safety, while the younger ones kept the alpha company. During one snowstorm, they clustered around him so tightly that his body vanished beneath their furs, an organic shelter against the wind. By day 14, the swelling in Alpha 7's leg had decreased. He stood briefly, wobbling but determined. The pack howled in celebration. I remember that moment with perfect clarity. I had climbed a rock outcropping to get a wide-angle shot of the clearing. From above, the scene was surreal. A circle of wolves, united by something deeper than survival. Beneath them, a leader wounded but not abandoned. As a journalist, I am trained to avoid anthropomorphism. Animals are not people. But as I watched this pack, saw their coordinated efforts, their quiet vigil, the way they adapted their social structure to accommodate an injured leader, I was moved to silence. I sent photos and notes to a biologist colleague in Yellowknife. His reply was blunt. This is extremely rare. Most injured alphas are replaced. If this continues, you're witnessing something extraordinary. Extraordinary was an understatement. One morning, I found myself tracking the footprints of 2 subordinates who had gone out hunting. I followed the trail for nearly 3 kilometers until I reached a snow-covered glade littered with caribou remains. They had made a kill, without Alpha 7. I returned quickly, eager to see how they would share the food. As expected, they brought back a leg and part of the chest. But what struck me was not just the act itself. It was how they waited. When they reached the clearing, they paused before offering the meat to ALPHA7, as if awaiting approval. The deference was still there, injury or not. By the third week, ALPHA7 could stand for longer periods. He limped slowly to the edge of the clearing, flanked on either side by packmates. His coat was regaining its sheen, and though his gait was uneven, there was a quiet resolve in his posture. That night, for the first time since his injury, he howled. It was a long, rising call, low at first, then swelling with resonance. One by one, the pack joined in. The forest rang with their voices. I remember setting my pen down, leaning back against a birch, and listening. There was no fear in that howl. Only unity. I left the clearing 2 days later to restock supplies in Fort Resolution, a nearby town. The journey took time, and I worried every day I was away. Would they still be there? Would Alpha 7 relapse? Would the pack lose patience? But when I returned, they were exactly where I left them. Only this time, ALPHA7 stood as I approached, his eyes alert, his posture proud. He had not yet resumed leading hunts, but he had begun moving within the pack's territory. Always protected, always surrounded. I had seen loyalty in dogs. I had heard stories of animal fidelity. But this was something different. This was a living chronicle of cooperation, of empathy in action. When I returned to the clearing after a week in Fort Resolution, the transformation in Alpha 7 was startling. Though still limping, he had begun accompanying the pack on short treks through their territory. I watched from a distance as he walked slowly, deliberately, with 2 wolves, Beta 3 and Delta 6, keeping pace at his sides. There was a new rhythm to the pack's movement. They hunted less often and stayed closer to the den site nestled beneath a dense cluster of jack pines. The younger wolves took on more responsibility. Even the typically passive Omega-2 had found purpose, watching over the pups and standing guard while others ventured out. By early December, snow covered the land like a burial shroud. The temperature dropped below -20 at night. That was when the real test came. A rival pack moved into the Northern Pines territory. I noticed it first in the tracks, deep, straight lines in the snow, too wide and too numerous to be from a wandering group. Then came the scent markings on trees, the raised hackles and tense body language of the wolves I was tracking. Something was coming. 3 days later, I heard it, a foreign howl. It came from the eastern ridge, low and assertive. The Northern Pines pack gathered within minutes. I counted all 16 members huddled in the clearing, their eyes turned eastward. Alpha 7 stood near the back, partially hidden. He didn't lead the charge. Instead, Beta 3 and Delta 6 moved to the front. That day, I witnessed a kind of tactical brilliance I hadn't expected. Rather than engaging the intruders directly, the pack spread out in a half-moon formation, using dense forest for cover. They drove the rival wolves westward without a physical confrontation, using noise, numbers, and intimidation. Alpha 7 watched from afar, tail held low but eyes alert. It was clear then that he had ceded operational control. But he had not lost his place. Over the following weeks, Alpha 7's involvement grew. I saw him begin to assert influence through behavior, not dominance. He marked new paths, selected resting spots, and began to participate in pack meetings with quiet authority. The others responded with respect. The pack was adapting, not replacing. I interviewed a wolf biologist via satellite phone. He called it distributed leadership, a rarely observed phenomenon. In packs under duress, he said, you sometimes see a kind of power sharing emerge, especially if the leader is beloved. Beloved. That word stuck with me. It wasn't scientific, but it fit. Then, in mid-January, I recorded something I never expected. The pack made a kill, a large caribou, and instead of the usual feeding hierarchy, they waited. I watched as the younger wolves hung back, allowing Alpha 7 to approach first. He limped forward slowly, sniffed the carcass, and took a bite. Only then did the rest move in. This was no accident. It was ritual, recognition. His recovery continued, albeit unevenly. Some days he moved with vigor. Other days, he lay under the pines while others hunted. But he was never alone. There was always one, sometimes 2 wolves nearby. Not assigned, but voluntary. They came in shifts, almost as if they had arranged a schedule. The bond between Alpha 7 and Beta 3 deepened. She had stepped into a leadership role but deferred to him in key moments. I once saw them standing nose to nose, a silent exchange of breath in the cold air, and it felt more like dialogue than dominance. In late February, I witnessed Alpha 7 lead a hunt. It was not large-scale. A small herd of snowshoe hares had been spotted near the western stream. He guided 4 wolves through a flanking maneuver. It was precise, efficient, successful. After the kill, the pack howled in unison. The sound echoed off the icy lake and through the spruce forests. It felt like celebration. That night, I sat by my fire, reviewing footage. The emotional complexity of the events overwhelmed me. This wasn't merely recovery. It was resurrection. And not of a body, but of a role. A place. A bond. Then came spring. Snow melted, revealing a forest floor bursting with life. The pups grew stronger, play fighting and chasing birds. Alpha 7 began to run, not fast, but steady. He joined full hunts again, and once, I saw him sprint across a meadow, limping slightly but unmistakably powerful. He had returned, but so had the rival pack. In April, the boundary breach was more aggressive. Tracks led directly to the den site, and scat was found near feeding grounds. I braced for a confrontation. It happened on a gray morning. I heard growls first, then yelps and the thudding of bodies in the underbrush. I ran to a vantage point overlooking a clearing. There, in a chaotic swirl of fur and teeth, 2 packs clashed. Alpha 7 was in the heart of it. He wasn't the strongest. He didn't take down the rival Alpha. But he fought. He protected. And when the enemy began to retreat, he chased them to the tree line and let loose a final, guttural howl. It wasn't dominance that drove them off. It was unity. The Northern Pines pack emerged bloodied but intact. And in the center stood Alpha 7, limping, panting, but upright. After that day, there were no more intrusions. The rival pack disappeared, likely driven deeper into the forest. And with that, peace returned. I stayed another month, watched the days stretch longer, saw the pups become adolescents, documented Alpha 7's return to full leadership. And finally, one morning in May, I packed my gear. Before leaving, I climbed once more to the outcrop overlooking the valley. The pack was resting in the sun. Alpha 7 stood at the center, nuzzling one of the young wolves. I lifted my camera and took one final shot. It wasn't just a picture of wolves. It was a portrait of resilience, of trust, of leadership reborn not through strength, but through love. I left the forest that day with more than data and photographs. I carried a lesson I never expected to find in the cold wilds of northern Canada. That survival isn't only for the fittest. Sometimes, it belongs to the faithful.